What's up, guys? Welcome back to Checkerboard Chat, the official sports podcast of the Daily Beacon. I'm Blake Von Hagen, the sports editor. He's Will Backus, the assistant sports editor. Today, we're here to introduce our new sports editors for the upcoming year. We're also going to talk a little Tennessee football, baseball, and softball.
Well, this is Blake and I's last Checkerboard Chat as editors at the Daily Beacon. Sad, I know, but we have a special episode today because we're introducing next year's sports editors. So we can just start with Noah. Noah, tell us a little bit about yourself, what your role is going to be, and what you've done at the Beacon so far.
So I'm Noah. I came on with the Beacon in 2017, right about the end of the fall semester. So I've been with you guys for about a year now, or a little over a year, I guess. And I'll be one of the co-sports editors with Corey. When I first started at the Beacon, I did a little bit of track, and then I did the softball beat, and had a lot of fun doing that. These guys put me on soccer last fall, me and Corey, and we had a great opportunity to work together. Got along well, got to cover a really exciting soccer season. Will and I did Lady Vols basketball this year for you guys. So, yeah, it's basically what I've done, and it's where we are now. I'm really excited to get started.
Like you said, it's not going to be a sports editor and assistant sports editor next year. It's going to be two co-sports editors. Corey Sanding is going to be the other sports editor next year. Corey, what have you done at the Beacon, and how excited are you for this?
Well, I can definitely tell you I'm excited. This is something I've worked for a long time, and I started with the Beacon in January of 2017. It's something that I knew I wanted to do here before I even came here. I researched it before, and I contacted the then sports editor, Trenton, who took a week to get back to me, but it was a much worth the wait because I started off doing men's and women's tennis, and then I moved on to soccer in the fall, and then I transitioned to men's basketball after that. And I did some track here and there. I've done swimming. I covered swimming and diving once, and then of course transitioned back to men's basketball again this year. We did the soccer beat with Noah, which we had a good time on. It was definitely a great experience. We got along well, and it was a heck of a season for the Lady Vols in that aspect. But no, I'm really looking forward to this. It's like I said on Twitter, we have big shoes to fill, and I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Yeah, big shoes to fill. Blake and I set the bar pretty high.
Plus you have big feet too. So.
Yeah, it's true. So with this new role, there's a lot of new, responsibilities, a lot of new sports you'll cover. Noah, what are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I guess working with everybody. I don't know if I should announce you'll still be around. So
yeah,
that's good. I don't know if you were saving that, but yeah, just working with everybody. It's a good group we have coming back, and I know we'll probably get some new people too. But as far as like the writing aspect, I'm really looking forward to football season. Obviously, something I've wanted to do for a long time is cover college football, Tennessee football, and we'll be able to do that. And obviously, I'm looking forward to work with Corey again. I mean, like I said, we had a great relationship there, and I think it's going to carry over into doing sports editing here for the Daily Beacon. But yeah, I guess the people, I'm looking forward to work with everybody and make this department, it's already great, and make it even better.
And Corey, the same thing with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to get to work with everybody. Having shadowed you guys a lot for the past year, to see, you work with so many people on a constant basis, but yet see us still produce, as relevant and as interesting content as possible is something that I'm looking forward to. It's a challenge that I think, that we have to embrace. And like I said, Noah and I got along great on the soccer beat this year. We have a chemistry that I think can carry over. And like I said, I'm looking forward to covering football. It's from a writing perspective, that's really what I've wanted to do since I've got here. And, we're going to get an opportunity to see what Jeremy Pruitt can do in year 2. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah. And as Noah mentioned, I will be back next year as a writer, not as an editor. Couldn't pass up the opportunity to work for you too. So now we can transition from talking about them to talking about sports, which is what this podcast is all about. Last Saturday was the orange and white game. It was our first look at the 2019 football team. Blake, did you notice anything really significant that stood out about that?
I mean, to me, the thing that stood out or that will stand out going into fall camp is the offensive line, because that was the problem last year is can you protect the quarterback? Garantano was knocked out of, I think, 3 games last year. So will the offensive line be able to protect the quarterbacks this year? I think they did a decent job in the orange and white game. But when he has time, we've seen that Garantano can make throws. And certainly I think the wide receiver group is the most well-rounded position group on the team. So I think it comes down to what the offensive line can do, and that's what kind of stood out to me.
Mm-hmm. And Noah, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest question I think for anybody is the offensive line. It was a huge liability last year. Even in the games they won, it seemed like it wasn't necessarily that they played well; it's that they were able to work the offense around it and be successful with it in like games against Auburn. But I'd say, that'd be the biggest question. But I'm really excited. I mean, from just a football watching standpoint, to see what Jim Chaney brings. And I know fans are excited to see that. Spring game, we didn't see anything offensively. I mean, they're not going to show you anything. But like Blake said, the wide receiving core is, I think, one of the better ones in the SEC. I think they've got a good group of running backs that'll do well. So it's going to come down to how well that offensive line can block up front and give Garantano time to hit those guys. And Jim Chaney's going to have his work cut out for him because he's not going to have the caliber of talent he had at Georgia the last couple of years. So that'll be the offense will be the biggest thing.
And just to touch on that, like you said, with the offense and with the defense too, you're not going to see anything at any spring game. It would be naive for any coach to try to run plays that they're going to run during the season. So it's basic, vanilla is a good word to describe it. They tell the defense to, they give them a limited playbook. So you don't really learn a ton from a spring game. I think it's about as overrated as going and watching 15 minutes of contact drills and trying to figure out what's going on with the team. I mean, you kind of got to wait till that first game of the season, and then you kind of know what you're dealing with, in my opinion.
Yeah, even the players reflected the same thing after the game. They asked Daniel Batuli, pretty much what's it like playing defense in the spring game, and he said it was nothing compared to what they actually practice. And nothing to what he has to remember to run the defense. And I mean, Garantano kind of reflected the same thing. They weren't really throwing a whole lot out there. Like you said, it would be foolish to do that. So it's kind of hard to come up with takeaways. But Corey, did you have any?
Well, I mean, aside from the offensive line, which has been a big question mark since last year, because Garantano, as we all saw, took a lot of hits. I was interested to see what the defense is going to do because in the secondary, it's not one of the better groups in the SEC. It's not necessarily one of the worst. But Jalen McCullough, he was impressive. Alante Taylor and Bryce Thompson, we don't really get to see much. I mean, you guys are right. They don't really run specifics that you're going to see come fall camp or come when the games actually start in the spring game. So it's not really something that you can take big chunks away from. But at the end of the day, I was impressed by the secondary play. I think it's something they still need to get better at. But as you said, like the wide receiver group, very well rounded, and if the offensive line can hold up, they could be pretty special on offense.
Mm-hmm. I think for me in the orange and white game, the biggest thing that I noticed was kind of the changes on defense. Tennessee didn't lose a lot last year in the offseason, only a few players to graduation, but a majority of them were defensive players. Lost all three starters on the defensive line. Lost Micah Abernathy and Todd Kelly Jr., who held down safety spots. Todd Kelly Jr. didn't play as much. And now, there's questions about whether or not Darren Kirkland Jr. will ever be able to play football again, so that's obviously a big leader gone now. So there's a lot of holes to fill on the defense. You've got a safety spot, a linebacker spot, defensive line spot. So it's interesting to get a look at the players that filled those roles. Shannon Reed started with the first-team defense. He had a pretty nice game. He had 10 tackles. Of course, again, it's vanilla, but 10 tackles in one setting like that with the running clock is still, pretty impressive, and it shows how much faith that they have in him, that they'd put him in that role to replace Darren Kirkland Jr., who, though he's battled injuries his entire career, has been one of Tennessee's better defensive players. And at safety, they started Trevon Flowers, I believe, on the first team. He's a super athletic guy. He's on the baseball team as well. He's not playing this fall, but he's there.
It's spring, not fall.
Spring.
Mm-hmm.
He's not playing this spring. I was thinking ahead to football.
Yeah.
He's not playing this spring, but so he's just a super athletic guy. So I think looking at the defense was interesting. Again, like I said, super vanilla, but that would probably be my biggest takeaway. And so when we're talking about next season, with football next season, you guys will be the ones covering that. What do you think are some of the bigger questions facing the Tennessee team? We can start with Noah.
Well, I think it'd be how they handle the schedule, because it's a little bit different than it has been in the past. I mean, the last 2 years, you had in 2017, you're right out of the gate, you're going up against Paul Johnson in the triple option offense. This past year, you're going up against Will Grier and West Virginia's high-powered offense. So there is kind of, in my opinion, with all the question marks, there's not really an excuse not to go to a bowl game this year. So I want to see how they handle that schedule, because they're going to have the opportunity this year to kind of ease into SEC play before I think they go to Florida first. So, how do they handle that? It's a little bit easier than usual. Can they get to 6 wins? I mean, this is a program that's built on, a lot of championships, a lot of history. Hadn't seen that in a long time. So that's kind of my biggest question. Is Jeremy Pruitt that guy? And I think that obviously you're not expecting to play in Atlanta in year 2 with this team, but yeah, I'd say that's probably my biggest question is heading in, can they handle that? Are they good enough to beat the teams they should beat and then maybe steal a few wins as well?
Court.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth. I think the consistency is the biggest thing that I'm worried about because when, last year we saw, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, they could never really establish a consistent rhythm. They had the games against Auburn, against Kentucky where they were effective for some, stretches of time, but, how will they transition now? Because now this is year 2 under Jeremy Pruitt. He's not necessarily dealing with all of Butch Jones' leftovers. So I want to see if his vision is going to be coming true, what that is. He's not really been clear about that with us, but at the same time, I'm just interested to see if his culture, what he wants to establish, is coming, to fruition. And, like I said, it'll be interesting to see.
Blake, do you have anything?
Yeah, you guys know I love my Vegas betting odds, and the line for the over win total for next season is 7. I think that's about right. I don't like to argue with Vegas anyway because they kind of know what they're doing. But, if they don't make a bowl game this year, it's one of the easiest schedules Tennessee's had in a long time. If they don't make a bowl game this year, I do think that would be embarrassing, I would say, to go 5-7 with the schedule they have this year. You have I don't have the schedule memorized, but you have your easy games, and then you basically, as long as you don't lose all those, Missouri, South Carolina, those kind of games that are considered toss-ups, at least looking ahead, Kentucky, those games going into the season. As long as you're not losing all of those games, then there's no reason to not make a bowl game. And potentially, if you win all the games that you're right there and have a shot to, then I think Tennessee could go 8-4. But I think 7-5 is probably what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, their schedule definitely sets them up for a moderately successful season. I mean, putting it in the context of the past couple seasons, a pretty successful season. If they can get to a bowl game, you could consider it that. They opened the season with Georgia State, and if I'm not mistaken, they play BYU the next week, which, I mean, that might be a tough matchup. BYU beat Wisconsin this past season. Wisconsin finished 7-5, but still, that's an impressive win on paper. So that could be a dangerous team. I always say BYU is the most dangerous team in college football after 9 o'clock. So, and then, I can't remember who they play after that. I think it's an FCS school. And then they've got Florida on the road, which is kind of that matchup that they always open up conference play with, kind of a hard matchup. But I think they set up well for a 6-6, maybe even 7-5 season because there's a lot of SEC schools in the East that lost a lot of talent this past offseason. You look at Kentucky. They lost Josh Allen and Benny Snell, so how are they going to be? Missouri lost Drew Lock. They got Kelly Bryant transfer in, but how are they going to be without Drew Lock? So I think that there's a lot of those toss-up games they'll have that they should win. So it's a question of whether or not they will win it. So
I think the BYU game's pretty interesting. Just from looking at the line of scrimmage, obviously SEC teams are known for having that power up front. Tennessee is fairly young at the offensive line. BYU is known as a team that's usually the oldest team in college football because you have those guys that they go on their mission and they come back and they're 22, 23, 24. So they might not be as big as Tennessee up front, but they do have that grown man aspect. So I think that could be a really interesting matchup, especially early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a fun game to watch. I'm kind of jealous you guys get to cover it because I have a fondness in my heart for BYU. But that'll definitely be it's a nice early season test for Tennessee. I wouldn't say it's a measuring stick, but it's a really good early season matchup for Tennessee. And if they struggle in that game, not discounting BYU, but if they struggle in that game, then you could raise some questions about how they're going to do an SEC play. Again, BYU could be a good football team this year. Don't know too much about them, honestly, but beat Wisconsin last year. Were ranked for a while, so we'll just see. So kind of transitioning now to the spring sports, baseball. Tennessee's baseball team has been doing a really nice job this year. They've already exceeded their win total from last year. They're in conversation for being a tournament team. I saw them projected to be a number 2 seed today in the College World Series. So I don't know how much you know about them yet, Noah, but could you just kind of talk about? I mean, you did cover them for
a little bit.
Yeah. For Vols Wire, just talk about what you've seen from the team this year. What's kind of been the most impressive part of them?
I'd say the thing that's probably impressed me the most is the fact that when SEC play started, this was a team that started out with like 20-1 or something. They went 7-8-0 before they lost their first midweek game. And midweek games are tough because you're not putting your best pitchers out there. But we'd seen that out of Tennessee before. We saw that under previous head coaches. You beat the non-conference, great, and then you get into conference play and everything falls off. And it looked like that was going to happen again. They got swept in their first series against Auburn on the road, and they've just come back. And outside of, they were this close to sweeping Mississippi State. I mean, they had games in that series where they had every opportunity to win the Friday game and the Sunday game. They, of course, won the Saturday game. So I've been most impressed with their ability to just come back from that, because they were looking like, you're starting to hear the chatter, like, okay, well, it is Tony Vitello's second year. He did inherit, kind of a tough spot, tough team. But they were like, okay, well, maybe they're not as good as we thought. But they've come back. They've battled back from that rough start in SEC play. And this is a conference that's always good, but it's very good this year. And then you beat Georgia at the time was the number 2 team in the country. You take 2 out of 3 from them. And then you go to Kentucky, who's not very good, but you go there, you sweep them, you dominate, you leave no doubt. And, we'll find out more this weekend when they go to Arkansas, who's the number 6 team in the country. So then, like you said, right now projected as a number 2 seed, I think, in the Lubbock Regional against Texas Tech, who's very good. And Tennessee hasn't been to the postseason since 2005. That was the last time they went to the College World Series. So, yeah, I'd say it's been an impressive season so far. And there's more to see, obviously, with this slate, but I'd be surprised if they don't, not make it into the postseason.
It's funny because when Vitello was hired, you kind of look at the first year you hope to win a few games and we steal a big SEC game at home here or there. Second year you just hope to make the SEC tournament. But at this point, SEC tournament, Vitello wouldn't like me saying this, but it's basically a lock at this point. It would take a monumental collapse for them to not make the SEC tournament. And I think that Kentucky series this past weekend says more about this team than anything else has so far. It's easy to get up and win a big game at home when you're in front of your home crowd. You're playing against a top team in the country. Obviously, winning 2 out of 3 against Georgia is also very impressive, and you don't expect to do that. I think our podcast before that, I said, you hope to win 1, and they won 2. So not taking anything away from that, but to go on the road and take care of business like that, I think says a lot about kind of the mindset of the team. And their starting pitching has been really good and really consistent all season, outside of Zach Lingenfelter, who's been kind of up and down throughout his career. But overall, he's done enough to keep Tennessee in a lot of the games he's pitched in. And it's not time to peak yet, so they hope that he gets there by the end of the season. They have one of the best pitching coaches in college baseball, presumably. So we'll see if he can get it together.
And I think that's the biggest thing is this pitching staff. It's not super deep, but it can hang with anybody in the country or anybody in the SEC, which is what this program has needed for so long. I mean, it's what you need anywhere, but especially in the SEC. And, I mean, they've proven it. They hung in there with Mississippi State, beat Georgia, obviously, destroyed Kentucky. So, yeah, I mean, the pitching staff's very strong right now.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say the thing that's impressed me the most was the pitching staff.
Yeah.
I mean, they've really kind of turned it around. You mentioned Lingenfelter. He's really been the only inconsistent one. Rest of the year, they've all been pretty consistently great. I mean, not just their starters, but even their relief guys are coming in and doing a good job of, finishing out the game. I think they've pitched 9 shutouts this year, which, if I'm wrong, is a program record. So, or it's 10 now, I think, which is impressive. I mean, that it's a testament to how good that pitching staff is now. They opened the year with a ton of shutouts, and then they're doing it. They didn't just do it against these smaller programs that they opened the year with. They're doing it against SEC teams too, against Kentucky. Against Georgia, they shut them out 1 game. So just the pitching staff has been incredible this year, and they really need that to get going because their offense has been pretty iffy. They've got guys like Alaric Solari and Andre Lipsius that can hit the ball pretty well, but their offense outside of those two has been pretty inconsistent all year. So their pitching staff has really had to win them games.